Hello, I'm Nelson Ford from the Gunsmith in Phoenix, Arizona, and these are my favorite question and answers. There's no studying for it. I can just reach into my experiences. So here's a good one. TN Trenton. Next Q&A, can you get more detailed on the left hand, right hand thread pattern on ejector rods, when and why it happened, and across the boards of certain models? It happened because with the standard right hand thread and the cylinder rotating to the left, if there was some friction on the front locking lug, it will drag on that rod, and if the rod's not really tight, it'll start to unscrew it. And as that cylinder's going around, that rod's unscrewing, it's going to go right up into your front locking lug, and your cylinder won't come out, and it'll be very frustrating. And there are ways to pinch it with your thumb and pull the hammer back just a little bit, and you'll get one or two cylinders at a time, and you have to play with the hammer and get a couple more, and sometimes you can get the rod to screw back in. And if you do, the way to deal with them is you grab them. I think I talked about this in S&W K-frame tune-ups part 1 or part 2. I grab them with a set of pennies, the ejector rod, over the knurling in a vise, clamp it down, and I turn the cylinder. And I always have rounds in the cylinder to protect the star from turning and keep it straight. And you turn the cylinder, and you just have to get a feel for it. You know, if you're just kind of a muscle guy and you're cranking on it, you're going to have a problem. You know, you're going to snap something off. You're going to do something wrong. But if you know how to turn them in and get a feel for it, and a lot of times if I don't like the way it turned in and tightened, I loosen it back up, and then I turn it back in and feel it again. And you do that a few times, and if you get a feel for where it wants to be for being tightened. But when you do that, of course, you always have to have the yoke in place. If the yoke's not in place, you're going to bend the extension coming off the star in the cylinder, and then you're screwed up. It'll be going like this in there. It'll never be right. This gun will never feel right, because if the cylinder doesn't spin freely, doesn't matter what you do in the action, you're always going to have dragging. And so you get a touch for tightening them. You know the system. I have a video you can watch to do it. It happened. I always, when I look at the older guns, when the cylinder won't come loose, a lot of times I just reach forward and I'll feel forward in the frame, right in front of the trigger guard assembly. There's a screw that used to hold on to a spring and a plunger and work your cylinder stop. And they just tucked the spring inside around November of '61. And prior to that, it's a right-hand thread, normal thread. After that, as the learning curve, went to a left-hand thread. And so that's how you can figure it out. Now, I still don't crank on them like I'm going to break them off if they're after or before, and I know the thread direction, because you're going to break them. So you don't know exactly where the number was. Nobody knows exactly what number where they did the change was. And then they may have had to use up a bunch of old parts too on guns later. So you give it a chance to go one way, and then you give it a chance to go the other way and see where it breaks loose. But November '71, a buddy of mine's birthday, 61, November '61, is when they made the switch. And I think they made the switch differently on the J frame than they did on the K, but it won't matter, because you're going to give each direction a chance. And I'm going to say it. Don't take your cylinders apart. There's no reason to. There's not enough dirt in there to do anything. They're fine. They're sealed. Okay, let's see what else. Somebody asked me today, why you take your glasses on and off? Because I use them to read, and then I can't see when I can't see beyond with my glasses on, so I take them off to see distance. I don't know if I'm a member of the Historical Foundation or not. I don't think I get their book. A buddy of mine brings me their book, but I do get their letters. I've gotten a bunch of letters from them. No fan of red Loctite being used anywhere near a firearm. Do you have any experience with Vibratite? Have used it scope mounting with no ill effects so far. Great channel. Us, thumb up, whatever. I can break Loctite loose, red Loctite, with a cigar lighter. They're usually 3 or 4 burners, and that will work in a lot of different places. One place it won't work is the 1911 grips. Guys got really red Loctite their grips in because they're tired of them coming loose, and you can set the grips on fire if you try to get those out like that. And just don't use Allen head screws in your grips. They strip. People bring them to me. They want me to get them out. I usually try to hammer in an oversized bit to get them out. But then you can sometimes heat up the bit, and the bit will heat up the screw, and the whole thing. Actually, I'm done with it because I've had people call me recently, and I won't do them anymore. I did them all my life. It made me old. You don't make any money doing it. I'm not on salary, and so I can't do those jobs anymore. So don't use red Loctite on your screws on your 1911. Just snug them when you're done shooting. The old-time shooters that had Marlins, single action Colts, the single action Rugers. I used to have to keep extra screws for underneath behind the trigger guard. Those frames in the Marlins, they're always trying to loosen up. So every time you go shooting them, when you come home, you tighten them up. If you don't want to tighten up screws, buy a Glock, buy a AR-15. They don't have screws, and you won't have to worry about it. But if you want a classic American gun that's got threaded surfaces, and the winner's got to be the Model 97 Winchester. It's got screws all over it. I bet it's got 20 threaded surfaces on it or more. If you don't want to snug up screws, buy something else. Buy an 870. It's 2 threaded surfaces, the stock bolt and the cap on the end of the magazine that holds the barrel on. That's it. No other threads in the gun. And so, as far as, I don't know this Vibro Tight, I'm not overly concerned about it. I don't use scopes. I don't need them for the shooting I do. I don't try to hit, a bug at 100 yards. If I can hit the propane can at 100 yards with my M1A, I think I'm doing what I need to do. But I'm not a scope guy. I've owned 3 scopes my whole life. 2 of them were already on guns when I bought the guns. One was given to me, and I gave that scope away. And so I'm not into mounting scopes and all that stuff. If people need them, I want them to have them. Enjoy your life, but I've been blessed with good eyes, so I don't need to use scopes. I have a Marlin 336, 1974 30-30. Could you make a video about action jobs on these guns? Mine had barely been shot when I got it, and I thought the loading gate would loosen up over time, but it's been like 15 years, and it's still tight as hell and quite sharp. It chews both my brass and me. I used to take the gates out with the frame stripped and take a cutter on a Dremel and clean up that area in there, and then go back in with a Kratex wheel so people didn't hurt or cut their fingers loading them, because I'm a Marlin lover. And I'll give you a few quick tips. As long as the gun functions properly, if it's tight, one of the reasons it makes the levers tight is the hammers are way oversprung. One of the reasons the hammers are way oversprung is because I think they put the bolts together a little too quickly, and they have a 2-piece firing pin. And when you close the lever and your locking bolt goes up into your bolt, it pushes up the rear part of the firing pin and puts it in line with the rest of the firing pin. And there's a little leaf spring in there that gives a lot of resistance, and that makes the firing pin hard to move. And I've shown people, you open the lever, the gun's clear, and you close it, take your thumbnail and push on your firing pin. If that firing pin is really hard for you to push with your thumb, it's oversprung, and you take a little tension off on the leaf. Then you can take some tension off on the hammer. And the way I do it on the hammer, I was lucky enough to have Model 94 Marlin, serial number 311 in my store at one time. I sold it to buy Christmas gifts, and I'm glad I did. I don't have any regrets. But that's a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was a 3840, and it was obviously made on the first or second day. And I learned a few things. And one of the things was on the lower tang, where you have that curved um, piece in there to trap the coil spring against, on the strut, the hammer strut, the mainspring strut, and it grabs in a slot on your bottom, on your lower tang, a little slot in there. This one that was marked 311, 311th model 94 made in 3840 had a ladder in there cut into it. It had 3 slots so that you could adjust the spring forward or back and make it lighter or heavier. And I looked at that, and every action job I do on a Marlin, I address that. But if you address that, if you put in a slot and you bring it back one slot, you better have free motion on your firing pin. So when you close the lever, you have it set up where you can just push with your thumbnail and push that firing pin when your lever's closed in nicely. And if you can do that, then you can lower the pressure on your hammer. You can't do one without the other. And as far as the locking and unlocking, that's another contingency part on the lever. They're hard to close or hard to open and easy to close. And there's a little plunger in the lever itself. And I usually polish those on a soft felt wheel with 555 Brownells Rouge. And then I'll take a couple coils off the spring. They really overspring them. And if it's like a 4570, I'll leave a little bit more spring in there than the 357s or 44s. And that makes the lever easy to go in. So if you're trying to do this stuff, it goes right in and out nicely. You can work the gun quicker. And then as far as trigger pull goes, it's the old adage, it's the old stuff. You color your sear, you color your hammer hooks, you put the gun together, and you work it a few times, and you take it apart, and you'll look at your hammer hooks, and you look at your sear. And you can see it, the sear's just touching on the very top. And so you need to friendly it, make it easier for it to get away from the hammer. And then also, a lot of times, if they're not really hard, they're like 5.5, maybe 6 pounds, because they can be a lot worse. I'll just gloss the hell out of the hammer hook, and I'll gloss the hell out of the sear and put it back in and see what I got. And if the trigger pull's right, then I haven't changed it much and got a good trigger pull. If it's not, then you have to work the sear, and you just work the area down, so it's easier for it to get away. And we have jigs on the 1911, the Tommy Wilson jig, that shows us where we can go to get away from the 1911 hammer. And you got to spend some time in there. And if you don't have spare parts, and I'm talking hammers and sears, you really shouldn't be doing it. And I know there's not a lot of professionals out there anymore that do it, and I sure as hell wish there were. I know a lot of guys give classes on it. I just don't feel like I've got the time in my life. And I've got a lot of relatives, and I still enjoy working at the shop. And so I do them at the shop. I still do them. Turn them around in about 2 months, and they'll be perfect. So, well, great video. As always, I'd like to know more about your past handgun competition history. What type of matches, events, guns, lessons learned, etc. I shot a lot of skeet, very little trap, but I enjoyed skeet. It's a little faster game, had a lot of different angles, and I did it with a pump. I was never an over-under guy, but I didn't shoot in competition doing it. I shot every Friday night for 12 years. My wife, 3 times, my birthday fell on a Friday night. She had to bring my cake out to the range because I was going shooting on Friday nights. And it was a gathering. It was a social event. There would be, at times, 60 or 70 people on 3 or 4 skeet fields. And we had a good time. There's plenty of 50-gallon drums cut in half on stands. We cooked steaks out there, and we had a great time. As far as competition, I shot mostly the Cactus Combat League practice matches on Thursday nights. It was considered IPSC. We had our own scoring. You got a second off for every A-zone hit. I shot both revolver and auto classes. For revolver, I used a 6-inch pre-model 14, which I still use today. And I shot there from 1980 to 1986. And I shot, I think, 300 matches. And in the revolver class, I think I won 64 or 68 of them. I can't remember. I saw other guys bringing back their ribbons and letting the club reuse them. And so I put all my ribbons in a box and I brought them back down there and let them reuse them. But we had a great time. We'd have 150 shooters there some Thursday nights, and we would have Mike Henry, Jim Phillips, Robbie Latham, Brian Enos. We had a lot of great shooters down there, and we had a great time with them. And that was the infancy. We started there, and I started there in 1980. Terry Allison was club president. I think he was president for 40 or 45 years. We used World War II 45s and police issue Smith revolvers. There was no such thing as red dots. Compensators came around, I think, in '83. At the shop, we used to install the Wilson LDK kits. We started putting on Bomars, I think, in '83. Chuck Rogers was cutting them for me. But those matches were big. They were big for us. There were a lot of shooters, a lot of competition, a lot of fun. We got moved around a little bit. The National Guard Armory tried to blame, I think, things that other people did on our club, because there were 223 holes and different supports at the place, and we didn't shoot 223s. So we shot at South Mountain, a range that has been there since, I think, World War II. And then some of the guys, later on, I didn't shoot with the club, and they took it out to the prison north of town. And I think today they shoot at Ben Avery Shooting Range, which used to be called Black Canyon. And we did a lot of speed shooting. I mean, by the time I was 30 years old, I shot 300 matches. And then there was little clubs all over the place. The Sportsman, there was a club in Wickenburg, and there was a club up in Payson. And you could drive a couple hours and shoot at different matches on the weekends. So, I've always wondered if checkering makes a frame more prone to cracking. Some of it looks fairly deep. You can only do, I think I covered this in my last Q&A, you can only take one crack at it. You can only, on 20 line sprints, you can only do one pass. And you got to do all 8 lines at once on your file, and then take 2 at a time. And if you think you can come back and re-deepen these ones over here after you've made it all the way down to the other end, you're wrong. You can't go back and forth on a pattern. You have to start at one end, take it all the way down to the other end, all the way down. And then you do the sides, and then you do your cross cut, which I talked about before. And if the frame is proper, and people are really sick of me saying this, the Colt frames are always proper. They were always right. I think they're still good today. They're tighter slide the frame fit. They're good guns. They were made for it. Talk to anybody that's a big-time pro in the business that's just not in it for the money. Guys like me that do one gun at a time, and they're all going to say start with Colts, because you can count on the thickness of all the different, the frame, and you can't trust them all. Hey partner, how are you? My name 1903 is nickeled, and the mag is all over nickeled. Is that correct? It's a newer one, no bushing. Newer, yep. It's still going to be 100 years old. About 30 years ago, a guy at a gun show gave it to me for $190. Believe it or not. If that gun functions, you bought a hell of a cool gun. Don't take the lower end apart. I used to put them together for different gunsmiths that had taken them apart and couldn't get them back together. They're a trick. If you can get it back together, congratulations. I don't know, without seeing it all, I have a friend with a nickel mint, 1908 in nickel, 308, 380. And I should ask to look at that gun. He paid a lot of money for it because it's straight. It's not a re-nickel. If you send me pictures of your gun and your magazine, I'll tell you what I know. Thanks, Nelson. Let's see. Scott, YouTube addict. What are your thoughts on also lightening the mainspring to reduce trigger pull? On a Smith & Wesson, we have a scale, and it's again on our Smith & Wesson tune-up, part 1, I think. and there's certain weights you have to achieve, and you have to get an old boxing rod style RCBS trigger pull gauge and use it to calibrate. And so there's a chart, and it's different for post 96 and pre 96. Firing pin on the hammer, firing pin on the frame. But if you're talking about a 1911, some of them are just really radically heavy, and I don't know why. The Gold Cups come with that green lighter spring, and you can buy those and put them in. Or you always want to leave a couple coils out of the mainspring housing. So it's got 4 or 5 out of the mainspring housing. That's a little much. Your gun doesn't need that. And that will help. I don't know if it'll lighten your trigger pull, but it'll make it easier to do a trigger pull. Because when they're really heavy, it puts a little bit more pressure on the sear, pulling away from the hammer. But you need Tommy Wilson jigs so you can get the angle of your sear right. And I could go on and on. You need hammer hooks, 22 thousandths tall. You need a disconnect 1305 in total height. You should have Colt disconnects, Colt sear springs, Colt sears. So I should probably close off this Q&A, but I enjoy these things. Keep sending me questions, and I'll try to get to them all. Thanks.